Reaction to the Pope's new vision for the Catholic Church has been nothing short of jaw-dropping, with many welcoming what they call a breath of fresh air. In an extraordinary 12,000-word interview, Francis called for a more inclusive church if it wants to survive. The church sometimes has locked itself up in small things, in small-minded rules, the Pope said. He continued, "We cannot insist only on issues related to abortion, gay marriage, and the use of contraceptive methods. We have to find a new balance," Francis insisted. "Otherwise, the church is likely to fall like a house of cards." Tim Reidy, who is executive editor of America, one of 16 Jesuit journals that simultaneously published the Pope's interview, joins us today. The people, and so we want to thank Tim. I was about to read something else that the Pope is going to say that I want you to respond to in just a second. Forgive me for that, but thank you for coming.
Nice to see you.
Welcome to Arise America. I want you to tell me just in general, I mean, I can gauge sort of what the world's reaction to this interview is, but what's the church's reaction to this article?
Well, it's been a big surprise. You know, we've lived with it for about 10 days because we got it about 10 days ago, but it's just an entirely different style that we're used to from a pope. I mean, you know, growing up, where popes were very ceremonial and formal, and they even wore crowns at one point. And you have somebody here talking in an interview in a very kind of fraternal way, very conversational.
And I wonder, in the Pope's in the Pope's effort to be more inclusive, and we're going to talk about some of the things that he said, including the inclusiveness, but in his effort to be more inclusive of the world, of perhaps even non-Catholics or lapsed Catholics, may he alienate some more conservative members of the Catholic Church and the Catholic leadership?
I'm sure people are still digesting this interview, but I'm sure there are some people who are made a little nervous about this because it's so different than what's come before. But we hope that his message for a big tent church will resonate with everyone.
Such a fascinating story how this interview came to be.
Yes.
Tell everybody how this came.
Well, basically, our editor, Father Matt Malone, was chatting with us, and after Pope was elected, saying, you know, how do we cover this new Pope? He's a Jesuit, we're a Jesuit journal, and somebody said, well, let's think about doing an interview. And said, well, if sounds like a great idea. Whether it would happen, we were doubtful. But wound up talking with other Jesuit journals, and everybody was on board, and the Pope agreed.
That is amazing. And I wonder how many people it made nervous that he agreed to do this. And were there any stipulations to this?
Well, it was approved by the Pope, so the final text was approved by the Pope. But surprisingly, it was not sent to some of the other Vatican offices for their approval. So in some ways, he was going straight to the people through his brother Jesuits and in their publications. Even
in that in itself was sort of a buck against the more conventional system that has been in place for a long time.
Absolutely,
so I want you to give me, and of course I know that you're the editor of the Jesuit journal America. You're not a priest yourself. No. However, I would imagine you have your finger on the pulse of what's happening in the Catholic Church. So I just want you to get your reaction on some of the things that he said.
Sure.
He talked about, first of all, politics. And he said this, he says, people of God want pastors, not clergy, acting like bureaucrats and government officials. What do you imagine he's opening the door up for there? Because in many ways, the Catholic Church has been a big bureaucracy and has legislated and regulated a lot of things.
Well, it's an enormous institution, you know, 1 billion Catholics worldwide. Of course, it's going to be a big kind of bureaucratic, and sometimes that's overwhelmed the message, the core message, and that's what he's calling people back to, which is it's about love, it's about ministering to people in difficult circumstances, and let's not forget that, and let's not get too focused on some of these other points that people have been focusing on for a while.
Of the many, many themes that he covered, another one was women, which of course is a very controversial subject in the Catholic Church. He says this, women are asking deep questions that must be addressed. The Church cannot be herself without the woman in her role. The woman is essential for the Church. So this sounds a little bit like an opening of the arms, but I do remember Pope Francis saying shortly after he came into his role that the door was closed, that the decision had already been made about women being priests. So how far does this really take women in the Catholic Church?
Yes, I mean, I think he definitely wants to push it more than it's gone. I don't think the question of women priests is something that's on the table, but just getting women more involved in church leadership positions at the Vatican, on the local level, that's something that can be done and should be done, and I think it's good he's pushing for that.
Yeah, and another thing that he said that I'll get your reaction to is, again, on sort of speaking out as he has been doing. He says religious men and women are prophets. Being prophets may sometimes imply making waves. I do not know how to put it. Prophecy makes noise, uproar, and some say a mess. Is the Pope making a bit of a mess?
A little bit. I mean, when he went to Rio for the World Youth Day, he said that, you know, he wanted the church to be a little messy. He wanted it to be out in the street. streets. So he's doing that, and it's making some people nervous. But so many people are connecting with him that he's doing something right.
I wonder how the College of Cardinals feel about he really has sort of been a radical pope, if you will. And as I understand it, half of the popes who participated in the conclave in which he was elected were appointed by Pope Benedict, who was much more conservative. And I know that you don't necessarily go out to coffee with the College of Cardinals, but what must they be thinking?
Well, and first of all, I think they were looking for a holy man, and they really found him to be holy. And in the way that when he was Archbishop of Buenos Aires, he was very humble, he rode the subway, so they saw in him somebody who they thought could lead the church. So they probably didn't know what direction it was going to take them, and so I think they're probably watching along with the rest of us.
All right, the cynic in me, who has been in journalism for more than 20 years, has to ask this question. And although this seems very spontaneous, and that I wonder how calculated it is, because the truth is, the numbers of Catholics that are participating in the church have been dwindling for quite some time.
Yes.
Is this just a very fresh but yet calculated strategy to bring people back into the church?
Well, that's important, and it's certainly an issue that we have to address. I mean, the number one, I think lapsed Catholics are the second biggest group in this country in terms of people followed by Catholics. So yes, I think that is a huge issue, but I think it's something, I think it's beyond that. I think this is true to who he is. He wants to reach out to people.
Do you expect that any of these comments, some of them that have been considered controversial, at least as it's related to the more conservative stance that the Catholic Church has taken, do you anticipate any of these to be codified? Might this become new policy, new agenda in the church?
That's an interesting question, because we're talking all about style and how his style is so different and set at different priorities. And this is really his first foray into kind of exploring how that would happen. So I'm thinking in the next weeks and months, we're going to see how that might kind of be perhaps codified.
Well, at the very least, he's getting a lot of people's attention.
Exactly.
Tim Reidy, thank you very much for coming in.
Nice to be with you.